Welcome back. Uh, I was thinking that I would start a new series of tags that just came to me as something that I think would be fun to do. And I'm going to tag a bunch of other booktubers as well. And I was thinking that it would be interesting to find out what were the most impactful books or memorable books in one's reading life. And so I was thinking about the chunks of time when how I might divide this up. And I thought, childhood from birth to age, 12, let's say, would be one chunk of time. And then your teenage years from 12 to 19, 20s, 20 to 29, 30s, 30 to 39, so on and so forth. And in each of those, time periods, what were the books that, impacted me, that I discovered then, what did it mean to me in my life? So I thought it would be interesting and it would be fun, to kind of chart one's life in terms of the impact that certain books had. And you would see kind of a shape of a reader's life through the decades. So anyway, I hope it's something that other people enjoy. If not, I'll just do it. But I'm going to try to tag a bunch of YouTubers that I know, and hopefully the tag will spread around. But it will be like a multi-part tag. So, one tag will be like this particular episode will be just childhood. And then the next episode, another tag would be, teenage years. And then another tag would be 20. So, each time period has its own show. Otherwise, it'd be interminably long. But anyway, I hope, people enjoy it. I hope people tag each other. It'd be fun if it became kind of a phenomenon. And it would just be a wonderful way to get to know booktubers in terms of like what mattered. And I'm going to range around. Like, it's not a snobathon. I discovered Camus when I was 5. Like, I've read the gamut, and so much of my early reading life is genre. And I didn't really become a heavy duty reader till I was in my late 20s. So anyway, so I thought I would start off the books I remember reading as a kid when I was, I don't know, out of the big picture book, kids book era, when you're actually reading, little novels or whatever books, were the Encyclopedia Brown series. They were written by a guy named Donald Sobol. I think they were written in the 60s. And in the early 70s, when I was a kid, I remember finding them from the library. And there were like a dozen or more versions. And it was this really smart kid, Encyclopedia Brown. And the way the stories worked was that there'd be maybe 5 or 6 stories in the little chapbook. And I'll put a couple of the books up as I talk about it. So there'd be like 5 or 6 stories. Each story would be a case. And, it's this kid who lives in the suburbs. So it would be stuff that he ran into, friends and things that happened in the neighborhood. But what would happen is they would tell the story. And at the end of the story, you'd have to figure it out. And the solutions to the mysteries would be in the back of the book. So you'd read along and, you would pore over it. And then when it would finish, you would be like, all right, do I know? I think at the end of the story, they would ask you, do you know the answer to this? And you'd have to pore back over it and be like, wait a minute, did I miss this? And it was so much fun because it kind of got you in the mode of like close reading as a kid. You went back over the books and you figured out, did I miss any clues? And then you would flip to the back of the book and often you were wrong. And then sometimes, you as an adult going back and looking, I think sometimes he hedged his bets where you really couldn't figure it out. And, there was no way of finding it. But sometimes there was, if you were an astute reader. And then you got in the mode of reading these books where you were lasered on like every sentence to figure out like, all right, what's happening in the story. So I love those books. They were wonderful. So I burned through them as a kid. And then my dad was a big Black Stallion reader as a kid. So a guy named Walter Farley, I'll hold up one of the books, Black Stallion's Courage. This is my favorite one of the series, by the way. I think it's the first edition. I got it for like $5 at a used bookstore. Anyway, Walter Farley tells the story of Alec Ramsey. So the first book, The Black Stallion, Alec Ramsey is a young boy. He's visiting someone overseas, like in Arabia or somewhere, or in Europe. And on the boat coming back over, because it was, like before airlines, I guess. Early 60s, I think they were written, maybe earlier. He sees this incredible black stallion get on the boat with them. And there's a shipwreck. And the storm comes, the boat capsizes. Alex swims to shore, finds a deserted island. and then discovers that this horse also has made it on the island. And there's this beautiful story of the two of them getting to know each other. They're the only inhabitants on this island. It's deserted. And they developed this incredible bond and this incredibly black, horse that untamed, but has this beautiful bond with this boy. And then the first book, and they're rescued, and they go back to New York. So basically, this is written from a New York perspective. Alec lives in Queens, and it just so happens next door, his neighbor Henry Daly is an ex-horse trainer, and Alex brings the horse back and puts it in a barn, and Henry figures out, like, what do you got there? And so then this story becomes Henry thinking this is like a world-class horse, and there's a match race at the end of the book when he runs against the two fastest horses in the country, and it's a wonderful book. But then there's another 15, 17 books after that, and they follow Alec and the black sire's other children, and so there's stories that revolve around the filly. He has a son called Satan, which, boy, would never fly today. Actually one of the books is called The Black Stallion and Satan, and it's they never got banned or pulled from libraries. Nobody cared, but I'm sure if they reissued them today, they'd have to rename the book. But so you follow, and then they eventually, because of the winnings of the black and the black's offspring, they start this farm upstate in New York, Hopeful Farm, and then most of the rest of the series takes place with them living up there. And it just follows their lives. The black keeps coming back when he has to, but there are books very much focused on their offspring. Some of them are adventure mystery books, and most of them are very good. Then there's also introduced as well the Island Stallion. So there's a 3-book series of this boy Steve Duncan, who's visiting his brother in the Caribbean, and there's this mysterious island in the Caribbean called Azul Island that no one's ever been to. And so Steve, I think, goes over there and discovers a way into the island that no one ever has before. Old conquistador mystery there. And in the interior of the island is kind of lush jungle, wilderness, and Flame, basically a red version of the Black Stallion, exists there. And so there's that book. And then the second book is, I think someone else discovers the island and the adventures that happen. And then there's a bizarre book later in the series when Flame and the Black race. And I won't spoil it, but it's a ridiculous premise of how they actually get together and race. But at some point, I think the third book in the series, Steve takes Flame out and start racing it. So it's very much similar to the Black and Alec. Wonderful, wonderful books. There are 2 books in the series that are based off of the Black Stallion, one of the Black Stallion's colts, and it's all about harness racing. I think it's the Black Stallion Sulky Colt. And there's one other one. And they're very good. And I thought when I was a kid, I was like, harness racing, who cares? But Walter Farley is a really good writer. He's a very good writer. He does not pander down to kids, and he knows everything about horse racing. So the details of horse racing are in there, but they're not too much. It's just, and the cast of characters that come through, the jockeys and the owners, and wonderful series. So I blew through those. The library had them all. Went through them. They were incredible. Then I discovered this book called Captain Gray by Avi, who is a children's book author who I don't know if he's still alive, but was popular in the late 60s and 70s. He wrote historical fiction for kids, and this takes place during the Revolutionary War era. He's wrote stuff that takes place during the Crusades or the Middle Ages. There's a couple of books with the same characters, and there's a whole bunch of other books that take place in the Revolutionary War era. And he's a terrific writer. So this is fascinating. This is a young kid and his sister. And I think in their house, and the British come and something happens, the house burns down. It's been years since I've read it. So the kids kind of take off for the coast. It's in and around New Jersey. And they stumble upon this pirate kind of cove nest, and they get captured. And they get split up. So he doesn't know what happened to the sister. And it's the point of view of the boy. And he's taken in, and he kind of becomes, kind of a runner for these pirates. He's pretty much a slave, but he's taken in. But there's something very special about the way the pirate cove is protected from the main Atlantic Ocean, and how these pirates go out and how they trap ships, and how they wind up, sinking ships and then taking the plunder. I won't spoil it because it's really clever. But I think I read and reread this countless times. It's just a rip-roar of a read. Wonderful kind of adventure book for boys and girls, I think, frankly. So yeah, this was a big deal. I mean, this was very close to my heart for a lot of years. Then another book that came along the same time that I hold dear forever is Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim. This was I remember coming across this book, and I think nobody gave it to me. It's possible, maybe somebody did, but I seem to feel like I used to go to the library as a kid. I'd ride there on my bike, and I would just roam the stacks, and things that looked interesting, I'd pull them off. This book, to this day, I mean, I reread it probably every 5 or 6 years. To this day, it's an incredibly beautiful book. And it's basically about, hyper-intelligent rats, set in a world where animals can speak for the most part. They have their own language. So birds and mice and rats, for the most part, can communicate, and they talk to each other in sort of, in the language of the book. However, then you follow a group of these rats that were collected by the National Institute of Mental Health, which is NIM of the title. And they were experimented on, trying to see if they could be made hyper intelligent. So there were a group of rats and a group of mice, and they escaped from the NIM laboratory. And the wonderful thing is, all this is backstory. So you follow Mrs. Jonathan Frisby. She lives in a cinder block, which is in the ground next to a big stone. It's very warm there, very comfortable. Her husband died years ago. She has 2 children. And, spring is coming. And when spring comes, that means the plows come out and, the pastures get mowed. And she's been advised by other creatures around her that where the cinder block is, it's going to get mowed. It's going to get destroyed by the plow when the plow starts mowing. So there's this tension of like, when is spring going to come? When's the plow going to get ready? And normally it wouldn't be a big deal. They summer usually in another area, back in some far pasture, and then they winter kind of back near the farm in the cinder block. But her little boy is sick with pneumonia, and so there's some things she can't move him right away because he'll die. So she has to figure out what's going to happen, and she goes to, she has some early adventures, and then she's advised by some of the, the animals around her, go see the rats. And, when she stumbles upon the rats, who also live in the general area of the farm, it's this incredible thing. I won't spoil it, but she discovers the rats, and then when she discovers them, she tells them what the problem is. They're discussing possible solutions, and then you hear the backstory of the rats and how they came to be. And it's wonderful. And there's a bit of a tragic kind of mystery ending too, which is just for a kid. Kids' books used to be tough, man. I haven't read kids' books in a long time, but they all seem very fuzzy now. Everyone wins, everybody's happy. You've read kids' books in like the 70s, man. They were hard books. Like, some not great things happen, but I think that's wonderful because you're not pillowed around by Harry Potter and the world is wonderful. So you have to grow up expecting that, like, life should be like these nicey children's books. It's like, we got blooded as kids, and I mean, I'm a Gen Xer, so my generation and back, The Giver, Lois Lowry, some tough books that you read as a kid, and this is one of them. Like, it ends in a very, it's a good ending, but it's not an easy ending. So as a kid, but it's just a wonderful book, and it's been near and dear to my heart for a long time. So then, mid-70s, 77 happened, Star Wars. All this stuff went away, and Star Wars mania took me. So I saw Star Wars. My dad took me in 1977 when I was a kid, and, I was like 9 years old. And soon after that, at the bookstore, I saw this book, which was the novelization of it. And remember, back in the 70s, no VCRs, when movies left, they were gone. So they used to do something called movie novelizations. And it was something where if you wanted to revisit a movie that's been come and gone. I mean, imagine, we can't even fathom that this day and age. Imagine a movie comes out And then, back in the day, they would rerun them every once in a while. But for the most part, when Star Wars was done, Star Wars was done. There was no Star Wars. Maybe they played it on TV every now and again, but like that was it. You were not, it was over. And if you wanted to see it or relive the story, you had to deal with these novelizations. So there was the Star Wars novelization here. Then there was also, I'll put up because I don't have a copy of it. It's killing me. Alan Dean Foster, I think at George Lucas's request, I think Foster Ghost wrote Star Wars. And then I think Lucas, I'm not sure if this is all true, but I think it's kind of what happened. Lucas wasn't sure if Star Wars wasn't going to be a success. He kind of wanted a low budget sequel option. Like, oh, maybe it does an okay money, but the studios are not going to give me big money to make a big sequel. But maybe there's enough there for a sequel. So Dean Foster comes up with this story about Luke and Leia on this planet of Mimban. And it all takes place on the planet. There's no ships, there's no star battles or anything. And but of course, Star Wars was like this global phenomenon. So Lucas allowed Dean Foster to publish it as a novel, and it was called Splinter of the Mind's Eye. And so I gobbled that up as soon as it came out. You were like, another Star Wars story. And then there were these lovely books. These were wonderful, and I got the beautiful copies of them. So the Han Solo trilogy, which are these three books: Han Solo's Revenge, and Lost Legacy. So Brian Daley wrote them. They're terrific books, terrific, just straight up adventure books in the Star Wars universe. He gets Han Solo and Chewie, like Han's a good guy, kind of a rascal, but a good guy. They take place in this area that's called the Corporate Sector Authority. So it's kind of a new set of bad guys. Like the Corporate Sector Authority has the really nice new ships. They're kind of the Empire. But in this area, there is no Empire, so it's Corporate Sector, which is kind of cool because you're exploring some new kind of political groups in this area, which are new for Star Wars, and all new characters. So there's no Leia, and it's just Han and Chewie. Those are the only characters you get. Lando isn't in here. Lando had his own books, which I never read. Another trilogy by this guy, L. Neil Smith, I think. Anyway, Han Solo Star's End was wonderful. Han Solo's Revenge is the second book. It deals with slavery and Han running up against slavers. And it also introduces this wonderful foil, this wonderful anti-hero opposite Han called Galandro. And it was kind of like Galandro is the fastest gun in the galaxy. And you meet Galandro in this book, and they don't pay off on whether Han is faster than Galandro, but it's kind of seen that Galandro is like way faster than Han. So it's interesting, very cool character. And then Han Solo and the Lost Legacy, this wonderful treasure of this ancient warlord, supposedly buried in this old, somewhere secret. And Han is trying to find it, but also Galandro is also looking to find it. And then finally, they face off at the end of this book. And it doesn't quite go how you think, which is great. It's a great series. And then when this book ends, the end of the book is Han realizing that, there's stuff happening with the Rebel Alliance, and he may want to go to a different sector to try to find work or to do another Kessel Run. So it kind of ends up that way. So it's wonderful. So this was kind of the very beginning of the extended universe of Star Wars, which didn't really kick off until Timothy Zahn's books in the early 90s. But it was beginning. But it was terrific. But I also was a huge Battlestar Galactica fan when I was a kid. And again, you could watch reruns, but once the main series, it only lasted one season. And then it was one season of Galactica, and then the next season was Galactica 1980, which is they find Earth. There's no Starbuck. I don't know if there's an Apollo. I forget who made it. Two new characters. I think Adama was the only one who made it. There were these goofy characters, Dr. Z, and it took place where they were trying to get to Earth and feed in technology to the scientists to kind of speed them up a little bit. Anyway, it was not good stuff. But first season of Galactica is still great, and I went out and bought Battlestar Galactica Photo Story, which is a book of photos, snaps from the series, done almost like a comic book, as you can see it, right? You've got kind of bubbles for the dialogue, and then there are snapshots. So they figured out a way to take stills from the entire story, and they made a book out of it called The Photo Story. So this is like, I used to read this thing over and over again. I think I destroyed my first copy. I found this on eBay for a reasonable price, and it's in pretty good shape. So I got The Photo Story, and then a guy named Robert Thurston wrote the novelizations of Galactica that started with this one, the first one. And these are really good because, first of all, Thurston's a good writer. And second of all, he adds slivers in these the three main novels that I'm talking about. He adds asides. They're called From the Adama Journals. And they're these beautiful, very lyrical asides where, you know, you get a couple of chapters of the story, and then there's a sliver chapter that says From the Adama Journals. And he's ruminating about all the things that they've lost with the civilization. He's talking about characters, and he's thinking about his enemies, and they're very beautiful. They're really cool, and they made these books more than just novelizations. You got a little extra in there. So so that's this one, and then the second one, Battlestar Galactica 2, The Cylon Death Machine. I don't have the mass market version of it, but I did find this trade, which has the first two Battlestar Galactica novelizations in it. And it was, so the first novel is a novelization of the first, I think it was a 3-part opening to the Galactica series. I think it was 3 episodes made up the main opening. And then there was a 2-episoder called Gun on the Ice Planet Zero, which makes up the second book, which is terrific. Because not only do you get the sliver chapters of Adama, there's a character called Croft, who's one of the guys who basically, they need to get through this very narrow corridor. There's this huge, it's almost like Guns of Navarone, Galactica style. There's a big gun on the planet. It's a Cylon base. There are base stars behind them. They can't go anywhere else. And this gun is powerful enough with one shot to destroy the Galactica. So they have to send a team down to kind of blow up the gun. And they have to get these people out of prison. All the people who have like this ice and climbing experience are prisoners. So they have to get them out of prison and then get them down to the planet. It's a great story. And the novelization is terrific. And so not only do you have the Adama sliver chapters, you have chapters from a Croft character who's the leader, de facto leader of the kind of the prisoners. And he's got these sliver chapters talking about his compatriots and about what it means for him to be rehabilitated again. So it's like, it's pretty good. Like it's not your average novel. Like it's got some extra dimensions to it, which is great. And then the third one, The Tombs of Kobol, which is again a 2-part episode where they discover Kobol, and they discover the way to Earth, and then of course there's an earthquake and it destroys the glyphs, so they have to get out of there. But yeah, so this is another really great one. And then they kept going. I think there's like 16 of the novels. Robert Thurston just kept pumping them out. I think 2 or 3 more were from the episodes. And then he just wrote original stories. He just came up with stuff until they got finally to the end. I like to collect them all just for the hell of it. I've only read, I think, the first 3 or 4. I think I stopped after that because I don't think they were very good. But the cover art was always wonderful. And again, that's something that was very impactful for me as a kid growing up. So that was almost everything. One thing that also through my childhood years that was a constant companion was Edith Hamilton's mythology. So I was a Greek mythology nut as a kid. I don't know how it happened. I don't know if someone bought me a Greek mythology book when I was a kid. I don't know if I discovered it at the library. Could have been a little bit of both, but once I found Greek mythology, man, I went nuts and I read everything on it. I mean, I got so many books out, but this is the one that I kept coming back to over and over again. She, such a beautiful writer. Now, she isn't a classicist in the sense that she speaks ancient Greek, so she's not translating this stuff directly. So scholars don't really put this on the map, but as a popularizer, she takes from Pindar and Apollodorus. She's kind of read the English translations of, I think, a lot of these, where the origin of these myths come from. She's read all the translations of those. And from there, and there are obviously always 2 or 3 different versions of the myths, depending whether it's Ovid or whether you're getting it from somewhere else. And she'll read them all and then synthesize them and tell you, there's a little bit of a little kind of italics before each myth saying, I got this part from Pindar, but Ovid does this part better, I did this. So she explains it all, but she can write. She's a beautiful writer. I mean, she really is just, I reread this too as an adult, and the writing just sings. It's so crisp and beautiful and clean. And she goes through pretty much all of the major myths and a lot of the minor myths. Like, she does a very exhaustive reading of Greek mythology. And again, I think I started on this one. I think, when you're a young reader, right? And if I'm reading The Black Stallion and all that, you're of a certain level, you could totally read this. But this was beloved. And I had a version just like this, mass market paperback. This isn't the same one, but I want to find. I don't go in for too many deluxe editions of books, but this is something where I want to find kind of a prestige version, a really nice version to have, because it's precious to me. Like I reread it so many times, and my knowledge of Greek myths is pretty intense, but it comes from this, a lot of it from this. So that ends my first Books of My Life tag, the childhood years. Again, I'm going to try to tag as many booktubers as I follow, as I like. And if you want to do the tag, please do it. And, reference my channel in some of your descriptions, so I'll get notified that like you did, and then I can come check out your tag. I just think this would be a great way for booktubers to kind of get to know each other's reading lives. Some of the tags we do are very superficial. But I think this one might be, 5 or 6 versions of it, going through your 20s, 30s, 40s, and teens. It'd be really cool to kind of get a sense of everybody's reading life. So anyway, I hope more people do the tag, and I hope you liked it. Thanks.